Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Board regular meeting for February 2nd, 2023 for the Village of Pinehurst. My name is Jeremy Hooper. I'll be serving as your chair this afternoon. I'll point out that we do have a full board this afternoon of all 9 of us here, so that certainly constitutes a quorum, and we do have a public hearing, so we'll be taking action possibly. With that, I'll go ahead and allow each board member to introduce themselves, beginning with Paul.
Paul Roberts.
Bruce Hieronymus.
Senator Rothstein.
Jack Farrell.
Julia Latham.
David Alzamora.
Louise Mercuro.
Matt Jones.
Welcome again to Bruce Hieronymus. He did join us for a work session, but this is his first meeting with the full board. So we're glad to have Bruce aboard on the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. And for staff tonight, I see that we have Alex Cameron and Darren Burch here as well. So welcome, everyone. First agenda item for us is to review the minutes from the 2 previous meetings. Anybody have any amendments, changes, or corrections? Hearing none, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the minutes of our January 5th, 2023 regular meeting.
Motion by David, second by Sonia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes from the January 5th, 2023 regular meeting are approved as written. Now we'll move to the January 19th, 2023 regular meeting minutes. Do I hear any additions, corrections, changes? Hearing none, can I get a motion?
Move to approve the minutes of the January 19th, 2023. I believe it was a special meeting, I think.
It was a special meeting. You are correct, yes. Good catch.
Second.
Motion made by David, second by Matt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the special meeting minutes from January 19th, 2023 are approved as written. The next agenda item as we move into general business this afternoon, we do have a public hearing with the Pinehurst Resort Cottages at number 8. Can I have a motion to move into a public hearing, please?
Motion to move into the meeting.
So Bruce Hieronymus has given us a motion to recess the public meeting, or recess the regular meeting and move into a public hearing. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Bruce, second made by David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we are now entering into a public hearing. Okay.
This is where you turn it over to me, Jeremy.
Turn it
Got
over
it?
to
Okay.
Alex.
Thank you, and just before we get started into the staff presentation and the applicants and all that, do remind those, if anyone wishes to speak, there will be a public comment period during the, at the conclusion of, toward the conclusion of the public hearing, and there's a sign-up sheet in the back of the room, so make sure your name gets on there if you'd like to speak.
Thank you.
All right, so public hearing number 1, this is a request for a zoning map amendment from the R30 Medium Density Residential District to Hotel Conditional District, and this for plus or minus 14.65 acres. Has been recently subdivided from parcel ID number 200000655. The property owner is Pinehurst Acquisition Corp., and the applicant is listed as Bob Kuntz with Kuntz Jones Design. So again, the current land use is R30 Residential District, and it is currently vacant and part of the privately owned golf course number 8. And it's, if you can see, it's just to the south and east of the clubhouse. Proposed zoning again is Hotel Conditional District, and it would allow, based on the general concept plan that's been submitted, for the development of 9 golf cottages, which would accumulate to a total of 52 sleeping rooms. I can attest that the public hearing was duly posted, adjacent owners were notified, and the hearing published. A little background about conditional zoning map amendments. It is a legislative decision and a process which does require public hearings. With a conditional zoning map amendment, an applicant may propose and the local government consider site-specific conditions related to that project. These conditions must be mutually agreed upon by the local governing board and the applicant and property owner. A public hearing is first held by the Planning and Zoning Board, which we're in tonight, and the duties of the Planning and Zoning Board after holding that public hearing is to forward a recommendation to the Village Council for their consideration. In making the recommendation, the Planning and Zoning Board shall consider the adopted comprehensive plan, the recommendation made by administrative staff, and the input given by the public during the public hearing comment period. A general concept plan, or GCP, you'll hear me refer to, is required as part of the application. That's a requirement that we have within our Pinehurst Development Ordinance. And if approved, that general concept plan then becomes a site-specific zoning condition. What that means is if rezoning is approved, the general concept plan is pretty specific, so that's pretty much an understanding that everyone in the public will have of what the development will look like, with some certain minor modifications that will be allowed. Any major modifications would have to go through the same process as the original approval. So a little bit more on the specific request. The general concept plan depicts a proposal of the construction of 9 lodging cottages, again totaling up to 52 sleeping rooms, with parking and some amenities which include an outdoor pavilion and a putting green. 5 of those cottages are 4-bedroom, 4 are 8-bedroom, and the supplied material does indicate that the cottages themselves would not exceed 35 feet in height, but it is worth noting that the maximum height in the hotel district is 50. The development is proposed in 2 phases. The first phase would consist of 3 4-bedroom cottages and 2 8-bedroom cottages, with most of the parking and amenities included in that first phase. And the second phase would feature 2 of 4-bedroom cottages and 8-bedroom cottages total. There would be a little added parking that would be included with that second phase as well. We'll see a map in the general concept plan in just a minute, but the area would be accessed off Murdocksville Road onto Centennial Boulevard, driving past the current number 8 clubhouse. This is an image of the general concept plan that's submitted. Again, the clubhouse is just to the north and west of the area that's outlined. And I know it may be a little bit difficult to see with the detail of the zoom there, but the gray areas, the dark gray rectangles there would be the proposed footprints of the 9 cottages, with the access coming in and kind of snaking around the development. The south and east portions of the rest of the balance of the property is proposed to not be developed and does consist of wetland areas that will have to maintain a buffer. The applicant has also provided some architectural renderings of the proposed structures. The 4-bedroom cottage front and rear rendering on the left, and the 8-bedroom front and rear rendering on the right. Adjacent land uses and zoning, you can kind of follow through with the zoning map there that's on the screen, as well as the table to the left. If you see, a large balance of it is all situated and surrounded by the existing golf course and is all zoned RD, or Recreation Development District. And then to the south and the southeast portion, there's the single-family residential lots that are part of just off of Gun Club and Garner Lane, part of the Village Acres neighborhood, all zoned R8, high-density residential. The comprehensive plan land use designation for this area, we'll see a snip of the comprehensive plan in just a little bit, does show this area as private open space and suburban neighborhood. A little bit about some of the features as depicted on the applicant-provided general concept plan and narrative. Again, the access will be off Centennial Boulevard via Murdocksville Road. Outdoor pavilion and putting green is depicted, and the applicant has indicated that any and all exterior lighting will meet the PDO requirements. Stormwater management areas are proposed and indicated on the general concept plan, and BMPs, or best management practices, will be required to be implemented if the project is approved. And water and sewer services do currently exist on the site. There will need to be a little bit of redesign and relocation with those, but they are there and they are provided and can be serviced by Moore County Public Utilities. Parking, per the PDO, the number of required parking spaces for this type of use is 1 space per sleeping room. And again, we have 52 rooms, and the applicant's proposing 52. 48 are standard, and 4 are ADA, so the requirement in the PDO is met. Buffers, landscapes, and setbacks. Mentioned earlier, a wetland area as depicted on the general concept plan. Because the area is being developed, then a 30-foot undisturbed buffer will have to be applied throughout the wetland area, and that is delineated on the general concept plan. Also, a Class 2 20-foot wide buffer would be required along development that would border along the adjacent residential properties, and we'll talk a little bit more about that with the staff recommendation. That planted buffer requirement is based on dimensions and square footage total, with plantings being required from longleaf pines, understory trees, and a shrub requirement. And the applicant does propose to meet the current hotel district setbacks. Environmental, again, spoke about the wetland area. It does kind of divide the south and the eastern portion of that project area from the development. It does contain a mix of longleaf pines scattered, as well as some hardwoods and underbrush in the proper area of the wetland. The applicant did provide a biological assessment, and this is what actually made the determination, or has made the determination thus far, that that area, it does contain wetlands. It is not currently on the U.S. wetlands mapper, but again, the biological assessment was provided, and with that assessment, there was also a statement on the red cockaded woodpecker habitat, and that assessment did say that there would be no negative impacts, and that also that the number 8 site is currently enrolled in a safe harbor program. The property is located within a watershed protection district, and specifically the Nix Creek. What that is there's a limitation for development for up to 24% impervious. Anything over that, a special intensity allocation would need to be required. However, with the total balance of this parcel being largely impervious, even through the undivided lot ownership, again with the new exempt subdivision and the surrounding golf course area, it's unlikely. However, with any conditional district approvals, if a special intensity allocation is required, it is included in the approval of the conditional district rezoning. And again, also BMPs or best management practices will need to be implemented to treat the stormwater runoff with the development. The 2019 comprehensive plan, one of the guiding principles, number 5, in under taking care of business, it does state that the village should do what they can to support the golf and tourism and healthcare industries that do make up the economic backbone of the community. Golf and tourism are 2 of the most important industries in Pinehurst in terms of employment, land use, and reputation. And it's important to try to help these industries and maintain Pinehurst's identity as a premier golf and hospitality destination. Again, the SNP on the right kind of has the arrow pointing to the proposed location of the development. You see the green and the gray designation there on the conservation and growth map and the comprehensive plan, and that does indicate that to be private open space and, again, suburban neighborhood. So conditions, that's somewhat why we're here, right? It's conditional district rezoning. At this point, the applicant has not requested any specific conditions, and it is worth noting that per our development ordinance, that at any point in time that the public hearing is first noticed, any conditions that are to be imposed or negotiated between the applicant and the governing board cannot be less restrictive, but they can become more restrictive. And again, keeping in mind that these have to be mutually agreed upon by the local government and the applicant. And also, conditions shall be limited to those that address the conformance with the current codes, as well as potentially any impacts that are reasonably expected by the approval of the development. So what the Planning and Zoning Board's roles and with considering these type of amendments are: you conduct the hearing, you review the material, you consider the staff recommendation, receive the public input on the proposal. After conducting the duly advertised hearing, you have the following opportunities. You can recommend approval of the conditional district amendment with stated conditions, again, mutually agreed upon, and you're also to adopt a statement of consistency with the 2019 comprehensive plan. You also have the ability to recommend denial of the proposed conditional district rezoning with specific reasons and adopt a statement of consistency or inconsistency with the 2019 comprehensive plan. You also have the opportunity that if a lot of public comment has been provided that hasn't had the opportunity to be addressed or considered, the board has the ability to continue the public hearing to another time and date certain to allow for some time to talk through some of the comments that have been raised. And I will conclude the staff presentation by giving the staff recommendation. And planning and zoning staff does recommend approval of the rezoning request to hotel conditional district. However, we do recommend that the planning and zoning board consider negotiating with the applicant a couple of conditions. One of those conditions is that in lieu of planting a Class 2 planted buffer, again, near those adjacent residential areas, if development needed to occur there, that existing vegetation be preserved and be used to meet or get credited toward meeting the buffer requirement. The thought behind that is that it is largely south and east away from the wetland area, but we did feel that that existing vegetation maintains more of a buffer than what our planted buffer requirement would provide. The other condition is, again, the applicant has indicated that the intent for the building height to be at 35 feet, but just to safeguard that, it would be nice to have a condition for that. And also, we recommend you adopt that statement of consistency, which has been drafted and forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Board as part of your packet. So that'll take care of my part.
Questions for staff on their presentation?
I have a question. If there were no conditions, then would this just be a rezoning not to a conditional district?
It wouldn't. At no time can they change once they've been advertised and heard for either a base zoning map amendment to a conditional district or vice versa. But the general concept plan, that itself is part of the condition, and that gives that greater understanding of both an applicant or developer and the local public and village staff, honestly, because if once conditional district rezonings and general concept plans are approved, that doesn't mean you can start developing. There's still a lot more work and design work that has to be done, more applications, submitted plans, Matt, I know you're fully aware of. And so what staff has to do is we have to vet those detailed construction drawings with general conformance of the concept plan. So again, the general concept plan, even if there are no specific conditions applied to that approval, it is itself a site-specific condition.
Yep, okay. And if you just were doing a typical rezoning, not conditional, then you wouldn't have that input
You had-
opportunity at that point.
Correct. There wouldn't be as great of an understanding of what might occur after that approval.
Makes sense. Appreciate it.
I have a couple. I may have heard you wrong, but I thought you said or implied that the previously defined wetlands were being expanded by definition through the survey. Is that correct?
So the tools that staff typically have, and I know the applicants will be able to speak a little bit clarity to it as they contracted with Dr. Carter to go and do that biological assessment, is that based on the tools and resources that staff has, mostly based on GIS data, as the U.S. wetlands mapper does not concur with the wetlands on that property. It doesn't show up as any. That's more toward the north and east part of the development site. However, by having the environmental consultant go and provide the impacts on the red cockaded woodpecker habitat, they did mark the area as that you see hashed on the general concept plan as wetlands.
So these wetlands, as defined in this general concept plan, they will go with the parcel in the future. Is that correct?
Correct. Until which point in time, again, because wetlands is environmental, it changes based on the current climate conditions. It could alter, but based on the data we've been given, it still would require a concurrence from the Army Corps, and that would make the final finding on that. But
Any implied or expected or requested intrusion into those would be dealt with because this is now a defined wetlands area.
plus 30 feet of the required buffer.
Second question is, did the technical review board review the stormwater management based on a 10-year plan? I know in the past, the resort has been quite accommodating and actually defined their definition as a 25-year for some of their proposed developments.
And thank you for mentioning that, Jack. It was covered somewhat basically in the staff report, not in the presentation, that the Staff Technical Review Committee, as they always do with general concept plans. And these are professionals from varying disciplines, including engineering, which would cover stormwater management, the Moore County Public Utilities, our fire chief. We reviewed it for general conformance with our requirements of general concept plan. And at this time, what our standard that the applicant would meet if this proposal was approved by village council is the 10-year pre and post.
Well, the reason I ask that is this is some 30, 40 feet above the residential area. It's a fairly, at some point, severe slopes. So I can talk to them, we can talk about that later with the applicant, is that correct?
You could, and again, bear in mind that this is a general concept plan, so at this point, what applicants should be doing is find what they feel would be the suitable areas and ways to manage the stormwater. However, at some point in time for the detailed engineering drawings, then that's when the calculations, the infiltration test, all that would have to meet what our current requirement is. But they may have done preliminary enough studies where they might have an idea of just how or what pre and post requirement they can meet.
Okay. My other question is, why is the entire 14 acres being rezoned to the conditional zoning hotel? And why isn't just the 7 acres that the cottages exist upon? And the reason I ask that is I sort of understand the logic of the beginning logic, which says that we're dealing with R30, and if we multiply R30 times 9 and divide that into the total acreage of the 14 acres, we come out with 9 possible dwellings on an R30. But since this is going to be rezoned to a hotel designation, doesn't the requirement of R30 kind of go away and the density can be higher?
So there's about 3 answers to that question.
Oh,
Okay?
I'm sorry.
All right. It's okay, just because there's different layers to it, Jack. One, I can't speak to the intent of, or the reasoning behind the why of the border. 2, again, there was a recently executed exempt subdivision plat that was prepared by the applicants, which follows that entire border that you see here. And then the last part of the answer to that would be, you have, again, that general concept plan, anything that would, even though the rest of the balance of this entire parcel were to be zoned hotel conditional district, any intensity and uses would require this to come all the way back through as an amendment. So that does not give, kind of to the question Matt was asking earlier, if this was all just zoned hotel, then yeah, there could be some potential they had that development right based on that base zoning, but not with this general concept plan.
Well, one of the reasons is, the way I asked it is that in general, our zoning should transition from higher intensity as you go towards residential, you want a little bit of a buffer. And that's why I thought if the lower half were to remain R30, then you would have an R30 buffer between a higher intensity of hotel use and a residential area. Now, how that would play out in the future as far as development, I'm not sure, but
And 2, I think that's where you get into the justification behind the planted buffer requirements when you have those separation of higher intense uses versus lower intense uses. But something the board, if they wish to engage with the applicant, they can.
okay, thank you.
In your answer to Jack, you had a point B. Can you repeat point B?
Right, so
You lost me.
previously, no problem. So previously, this 14.65 acres, which is outlined on the general concept plan here, it was actually contiguous with a larger balance of that parcel ID, the 200665, or I'm sure I got that wrong. But what they did in order to break off the development from the rest of that area is they prepared a plat, and it is exempt subdivision because it's exempt by definition, by statute, because it's not a true It's a true division of land, but it's greater than 10 acres. So then they've basically created this new property
We will have a separate parcel ID and.
eventually. When a new deed is filed and the tax department assigns it, it will be.
Okay, thank you.
And what I heard you saying is because we are looking at this as a conditional use, that platting, the cottages, if they want to do anything, on the south end of that property, they're back before us again.
Correct.
Okay. Anything, go ahead.
Anything not compatible with this
Right,
classification.
right, that we're
Yeah.
seeing now, like putting in 5 more right against Garner Road, yeah.
Anything that would increase the density or the range of uses, or anything other than, maybe a fence or a wall or whatever else, whatever other defined minor modifications in the PDO that staff can allow.
Okay, what about something like an additional putting green or a swimming pool or,
Accessory structures potentially could be allowed if it rises to the level where it's significant or could have a discernible impact, then the village planner always has that ability to say, this is not a minor modification, and therefore it must go back through the process.
what do you mean by discernible impact? A
you
swimming
would ask
pool's
that
not going to be a discernible impact in density, but it's going to be a discernible impact in, potentially noise.
That's where we just have to exercise a little cautious discretion
I
in
see.
making that decision.
Okay,
I mean, we could debate this a lot, what those potential changes could be. And I don't think we've had any issues. Landscaping is one thing that you cannot modify at all, which is why you've seen a lot of specific conditions, because it helps staff on our end when we're doing that. If anything varies from that, then we know for certain that it's got to go back through the same process that it was approved.
Julia brought up a good point, is that accessory uses related to a hotel can be quite varied and more intense than you would think initially.
well, I mean, how many times, I certainly have seen in traveling with my kids at Disney, outdoor movie screenings. I don't
Ice
know
rinks,
how I would, yeah,
swimming pools,
sure.
riding.
They might not need
riding
them, they
rings.
have a new wetland area right on the property, so.
And there's another large water feature just to the north and east there, but I wouldn't recommend swimming in it.
When it comes to the buffer, I guess because you're allowing them to use the existing vegetation, the Class 2 buffer is only 20 feet basically, and they would have to improve that based on whatever the existing standards are.
So what that would do is it could potentially create a 20-foot dimension out from this area that surrounds the residential lots here, 20 feet out, following the property. It wouldn't be, this little notch here is a lift station owned by Moore County, so it wouldn't apply there. And what it would do is it would preserve that area as meeting the buffer requirement, right? And so then that existing vegetation would need to remain in order to meet that requirement. So what it would do is prevent from, sometimes, again, because, and I know Luis will attest to this, the perfect development code hasn't never been written. And our landscaping standards, especially our planted buffer requirements, and I'm sure I will get some concurrence from at least some folks in this room, sometimes they create more problems than they fix, one. Two, there could be situations there that make conformance with that totally impractical. So it was just a way to safeguard that, but also keep from having to meet a buffer requirement to fell trees in order to plant a shrub.
Well, yeah, and no, I like the idea of utilizing what's already there, but in case any of that were disturbed, I wouldn't want the standard that they'd have to replace that to be any lower than what was disturbed.
So it could be a count for count, basically, saying we're going to keep those existing trees and whatever understory that's there, and that meets the buffer requirement.
The proposed development is probably, 300, 400 meters away, right?
I don't compute meters, sorry.
Well,
I-
I'm talking 20
Sounds
foot.
great.
Yeah, I mean,
the
20-foot
distance.
buffer, but we're a couple hundred meters away from, I mean, I understand the restrictiveness, but, you know, if the plan is to execute vaguely of the way it looks, we've got, you know, many times that in buffer, is that right? Okay.
And there is there's a significant elevation there. If you had opportunity to visit the site, looking down toward this way,
I've not been there, so the contour lines like Jack brought up, I mean, at 450 to 410, I think that's 40 drop in about 150 meters. How much does it continue to drop? Because the contour lines are not on,
Now, they don't continue down to the residences, right?
which if it was significant, I probably wouldn't want to put them on there either. Do we know, is it a significant drop in elevation, or does it kind of peter out within that distance?
Can I pretend to answer that?
yes, I don't have the
Because I
data
know
in
the
front of me.
area
I see
reasonably.
someone next to me is already working on it.
From the plateau where the cottages are proposed, the plateau part in the beginning, down to the residences on Garner, is that the name of the road there? I think it's in total probably 35 feet, maybe, something like that. But the majority of it is right in the beginning, because it drops very heavily in the
Not
beginning.
significant.
Right.
Hey, Alex, just a little clarity on density for future changes. Let's say between Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the project, Phase 2, the applicant decides to keep 52 rooms but change the number of buildings from 9 to 8. Would that trigger coming back through the zoning process, or does that fall within staff purview?
So, if I'm trying to, so you mean a lesser number of structures?
Lesser number of structures, or possibly more, but still the same number of units in use?
The way I would interpret that would be, okay, if you're going down, if you're decreasing, then of course, no. But if you were to change where one of the structures were now to be a 9 or 10 bedroom cottage, then to me, that would be an increase. So that would have to go back through.
Okay, just a little clarity on that situation. Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, ingress, egress, 2 locations. Is there primary and alternate, one that's expected? And, you know, I'm just wondering how much traffic is going to be, I mean, I don't, been back on Gun Club Road. I don't know how much traffic along with the existing homes that are there that it's prepared to take.
So the only access is proposed off Centennial Boulevard, so that's all internal and will not be from Gun Club.
The other bit's just utilities, correct?
What's the red line mean, dotted red line?
Utilities easement.
That's the sanitary sewer line, I think, that leads down to the lift station.
There's one there, but there's another one that goes to the end of Gun Club, where it butts up to the
Oh, so
property,
one way in.
but it appears to just be a utility easement.
Art path, I think. Or utilities, one or the other. Okay, got it. Okay. I retract that question.
Yeah,
There'll be nothing left for the applicant if we continue
bright
this up.
orange and red as far as line
I'll send my
choices
bill
are
in
tough.
immediately.
Anything else for staff? All right, you're off the,
Come on.
come on. Okay.
I
All
guess,
right.
so with the one access, there's no emergency requirement or anything like that based on the density or type of use?
It's met. They have the, I'm sorry, they have the width, and it will have to meet the standards to support the fire apparatus in the case.
Take that as a, thank you, Alex, for the presentation from staff. Afternoon, I'm sure we'll have some more questions when we deliberate. Now we'll go ahead and welcome up the applicant. If, Bob, is it going to be you presenting with us this afternoon? Okay, all right. If you two will just introduce yourselves and please. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bob Coons with Coons Jones Design. And I'm here this evening representing the resort and their request for the golf cottages. And you guys did get through most of my presentation, so I'll keep it pretty brief. So, but the resort would like to build 8 are 9 golf cottages at the number 8 golf course, and you've seen a lot of the information already. These would be these would actually be the only golf lodging on golf in all of the Pinehurst properties as of right now. So if you think about the resort, the hotels, everything, nothing is really on golf right now. So this provides an opportunity to have a private secluded area on golf that offers a little bit different opportunity for the resort. So looking at the overall site, you can see the yellow line that outlines is the overall property boundary. It's a very large site. I believe it's 420 acres or so overall, the number 8 property. And you can see the access coming in, the main area, past Golf Pride, back to the clubhouse. And then you can see the area outlined in orange that is the 14.56 acres that we're requesting the hotel conditional district. Alex went through the zoning, but the current zoning is R30 on the property, and it would permit up to 21 residential units on the property, and we're asking for 9 golf cottages. The wetland area, as Alex mentioned, this was delineated specifically by Dr. Carter and would be used in all of the applications, anything that needs to go through the Corps of Engineers. It was actually flagged by their wetland consultant, by the wetland consultant, and surveyed specifically by LKC surveying, and that is the large blue area that you see there. And it is a finger, and the property does drop from the northern portion where the existing road ends. It does, as you were discussing there, you can see the flatter area. I'm not sure if I can point. I can point up there. You can barely see it. But as you come in, this cleared area is relatively flat. And that cleared area right now is used for sand and some maintenance items and some overflow parking in a case of a big event or something at the number 8 golf course. And that's you can see the flat area, and then it starts to drop quite a bit as you come down to the wetland area. There are existing utilities on the property. There's existing sewer utility that comes down this way, cuts across, and cuts back to the lift station that's located here. An existing water that actually starts out at Murdochsville Road, comes all the way through the property, serves the clubhouse, and then comes through and loops back for a loop lane at, I think this is Gun Club Drive, I believe, right here. So that connection is there. So all of that will remain, all of this area will remain, and this is the number 10 green right there. You can barely see it in that image, and number 7 green there. So looking at the site plan, again, in a little more detail, you can see where coming in, the entry drive coming off of Murdochsville Road, looping around the clubhouse, and right now the asphalt ends right about here, just as you get past the service drive for the clubhouse. The plan is to continue that road and bring it into the property. The gray line loops around this way and comes back out. And I've got a little bit more detail on this in a second. And looking at the distance from the property, and this goes back to the discussion about the buffer and the area here. The closest cottage is over 600 feet away from this boundary, and to the wetland edge is about 530 feet. So there's a lot of vegetation here. All of that vegetation is very thick, pretty well established pine forest, and wetland area with thick underbrush and things going through this entire area. So there's very little visibility from this area. And with the general concept plan, we are proposing no development on this side, and there's no intention of coming across. Obviously, with backing up, trying to get to these parcels to develop is a big challenge because of the wetland area. If we tried to cross that wetland area, it would be very challenging, and trying to cross this way would be extremely challenging too. So there won't be any access coming in this way other than the Moore County vehicles that service the lift station currently. So the plan in just a little bit more detail, you can see coming around as you enter in, the parking areas are dispersed a bit. Looking at some parking spaces, the 8 parking spaces as you come in off of the drive, and then going around the 9 cottages. We've set the cottages in locations where they all have golf views and good golf views. If you've been to the site or have played the golf course, on number 9 is significantly above this site. So there really wouldn't be any views looking back toward the 9th hole. So we wanted to orient all the golf cottages along areas where you could get good golf views. The cottages that are on number 10 actually have really long golf views. They look across number 10 and the views will be really great. The cottages that are oriented toward the 7th hole across the wetlands with some limbing and some underbrush clearing and maintenance, they'll have great views back to the 7. And then the cottages that are on the 8th hole, the par 3, have wonderful views across to the lake and connect over that way. We've designed the parking in a larger area, and stormwater would be located in the middle for the parking area. And then each individual cottage would have its own small basin that would handle stormwater management. We're hoping that those can be sort of a bio basin, so we don't have to, so it looks more natural and blends in with the landscape there. There is a large area of a practice putting green and an amenity that will be just an open air structure with a couple of fire pits. And that will be an area for gathering in the evening and after your round. As Alex mentioned, we are requesting the hotel conditional district zoning and 9 total cottages with 52 rooms. We are providing the hotel required parking. The maximum building height, which is one of the conditions, which we actually had included in our information, is 35 feet. Because we want these to be a more residential scale. Alex showed the images of the cottage elevations earlier. So it's a much more residential look versus something like a hotel. There is a 30-foot non-disturbed buffer at the wetlands. We are following the setbacks. The overall impervious surface for the site is about 18.75%, which is significantly less than the requirement of 24%. And Alex did a good job of discussing the red cockaded woodpecker situation. Utilities, as I mentioned, would be adjusted. Utilities are already on the site, water and sewer, in capacities that can handle the additional cottages. This is a routing of how we see the utilities going and being connected. Some of the utilities that are on site now will need to be relocated and abandoned and reconnected during the construction of this project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. One thing I will say is that we do concur with staff on the buffer. Those 2 conditions are acceptable to the applicant. No problem. Mm-hmm.
Questions for applicants?
Just to clarify, when you said you concur on the 2 conditions, was one of those the height?
Yes,
Okay,
that's
thank
right.
you.
Mhm.
So I know all of the projected developments on the top part of this parcel, and it's probably impossible to say right now, but the development of the lower half, is that more unfeasible because of the terrain and just geographical conditions, or could that be developed at some point?
It's actually a couple of items, and Tim, correct me or do you want to go ahead and?
Well, I
take
can
that?
speak to
Yeah.
the plat. So the 14-acre plat was, the ultimate boundary going to the south on the screen gives access to a public way, so we didn't create a landlocked parcel. That was the explanation that our surveyor gave us. But generally, other than that, as Bob mentioned earlier, doing anything on the site from the north to the south with the wetland and, as it is currently situated, would be very challenging from a permitting perspective. So the parcels to the south and the east there, most of that would be accessible only by golf course, and then the other one off of Gun Club Lane potentially. But as Bob said, there are no development plans for either of those.
If Moore County has an easement running through the 2 residential properties there as well, through their lots to get to their
I'm not real sure about that easement, how they actually service the pump station. You can see the blue line, which is a 12-inch water line that comes from Murdochsville Road all the way down Centennial through this site, and then ties in on Gun Club. They may access it on that existing dirt road, but my guess is they probably have an easement between those two lots.
I had a related question, which isn't extremely significant, but it's shown as proposed easement on there for all this utility, but, I mean, I know that they don't always have easements, even though they have lines there.
Right. So I think there is an old plat, Matt, on this that shows an easement on the water and sewer lines. So this was some previous development plan where they actually extended sewer into the site, a leg off of what we see there.
Right.
As Bob mentioned, those will have to be relocated. But whatever easement does not exist, we will provide an easement to Moore County Public Utilities, and I would assume that they have some, that thing's been there for 20-plus years. I would assume they have an easement that's at least implied.
Right. Okay.
I'm wondering about I suppose the right word would be the management of the hotel property, of the cottages with the 52 rooms there. Is there any plan to have any on-site supervision of the hotel property, either at the clubhouse or, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, operationally, that's probably a better question for Calvin, but I would assume that they would treat it just like hotel operations. They would have security, guest services, et cetera.
And that would be on-site-ish? Okay, from the clubhouse. Okay, thank you.
I have a question. You said you did talk to Moore County Water and Sewer, that there's plenty of water in Moore County for these?
Have they what? I'm sorry.
There's plenty of water available for Moore County?
Yes, actually, with the general concepts plan submittal, there was a flow test executed on site, fire flow test by Moore County, and resultant ISO calculations. There's that 12-inch line that comes through there. I think it generated on an ISO calculation, if I remember correctly, somewhere like 5,000 gallons a minute, which is a lot. Sewer capacity, the only thing that sewer line currently serves is an 8-inch gravity sewer line. It serves the existing clubhouse. So yes, there is adequate capacity there, and they have confirmed that.
Where does that water come from originally, that you were just telling me?
Well, Moore County, as you all probably know, water that comes through Pinehurst comes from a variety of sources. So it comes down Murdochsville Road, also comes through the gun club, so they've got this big loop connection in there, which probably helps the fire flow issue that they have, or the abundance of fire flow, I should say. And as Moore County sources come from a combination of wells, Harnett County Regional, same place that water comes from that gets to here.
That's what I'm heading to. Because I've talked to the Moore County Water, and we do need to be careful about this, and I'm just bringing it up since we're adding 52 areas for water, that we may not be able to buy all that water from other counties as the climate has changed. So I would like to have some answers from somebody.
Well, I mean, they have agreed that they would serve it. This is, it's sort of the equivalent of, we'll call it 9 large houses. It's not 30, it's not, how many, what was it, zone? 30?
21. You could
21,
do
so
21.
I would say the 9 is no more than the 21 that would be allowable there, and by all practical purposes, from a water and sewer standpoint, this is a pretty low volume development. I don't really see any issue with it. I mean, I'm sure the county has lots of developments that have larger impacts in water and sewer than this.
Tim, is it safe to say that, well, first off, the applicants definitely checked off this
Yes.
obligation
Right.
for the requirement for what our purview is. But is it safe to say that the county's forecasted a lot of developments just like this and that type of such? I mean, you know this better than
Jeremy, I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be.
I can't specifically say how they address this one within that overall plan, but yes, I think they,
Have a bigger scope and a view is what I'm trying to
right,
get to.
right.
No, I think it's pretty interesting. I think it's exciting. I think you're right, it's unique, and it would provide a lodging facility for larger groups and so forth. Can you explain a little bit about the cottages themselves? I mean, I know that they're going to have either, 4 or 8 bedrooms, so to speak, but can you talk about occupancy and/or do they have kitchen facilities? Do they have a large living area? I mean, is that the expectation? In other words, will they be residences?
Right, and I mean, one of the things I was wondering, and I think it's akin to Jack's question, is if two different groups, would two different groups rent a cottage and a room is locked, like this is my room and no one else is going in it? Or is it more like a group rents this edifice and it's up to the people who are in there about the coming and the going, if that makes sense?
Are they treated as separate residences, or are they suites within a particular hotel, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the intent, and Calvin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the intent is that they would be rented as one individual unit. You wouldn't rent individual rooms, you would rent the unit. And these units will not have kitchens.
Okay.
They will be very simple. It's mostly bedrooms and large gathering area
Okay.
for, around a TV. There will be refrigerator, there'll be, places that they can put things, but there won't
Mini
be
bars?
stays. Yeah, exactly. Lots of mini bars. And snacks and things like that, but nothing that would constitute a kitchen or anything along that line. It's very much for golf groups, so a group of 8 guys would come in, they would rent one unit, and
That's the expectation.
That's the expectation.
And so they'll go to another resort dining facility.
That's right, yeah, or the newly renovated number 8 clubhouse, so there's
Which makes
now
sense.
better dining there now. So, yeah, absolutely, and there'll be shuttles back and forth to the resort. It will operate just like any other resort property. That's the plan.
That's unique. It's very interesting. Can you explain a little bit more about the pavilion and its use? And the reason I ask that is, we're 600 feet from residences here, as you described, 35 feet above them or something like that. I know present company accepted, but, golfers, when they want to, after the round, they want to have a few beers maybe and party outside, and it can be noisy. Can you explain how that's going to be managed and/or used? Will it be used for large parties with DJs and so forth?
I don't think there'll be DJs. I don't think it would be that kind of a thing. It's more for golfers after the round to go sit at night. If there's a large group that, the anticipation is that one group for maybe the US Open or something along that line could come in and rent the entire piece. They would be able to utilize those facilities, utilize the area out there for anything that they'd want to utilize. It's also a gathering place for groups that don't know each other. It's a place where you can meet the other folks that are staying there. It's a very social type of a space around the fire pits. So, our thought is that it's there. The clubhouse also has those facilities as well, which is not that far away. But having them captured here and having that putting green where you can settle bets or whatever it may be at the end of the day.
So you're saying it's not going to be generally considered a resort event facility where they would hold events?
No, that's not the intent. It's more for the golfers that are staying here. There won't be any outside events or anything like that there.
So.
Maybe during the US Open.
Well, I tend to wonder, I'm looking at this going, wow, I could imagine, maybe not in today's economic climate, but the world changes, a large corporate event here, and we're going to, do some big corporate event thing at the pavilion, and it does have the potential because it is an isolated area. You don't have to worry about drunk drivers. It has the potential for becoming a real great place to have a big party, potentially a wedding, you know, I mean, there are a number of things where I could see, wow, that would be a great use for this. And that was part of my question about wondering if the hotel was going to have on-site oversight, where if things were getting too loud, out of hand, something after 10 p.m., there's an easy way to rein this in and have it comply with what we would expect to be a use 600 feet from a residential neighborhood.
This type of concept is not unusual these days, around the country with other golf courses. But I've been in some that have kitchens and some that do not. Would catering from an outside vendor be permitted?
I'm sure it would be. Oh, no, from the resort itself.
Only from the resort, okay. So while you're not having cooking in there, you would provide that. They wouldn't have to necessarily go to the clubhouse or to the Carolina. They'd have the ability to have an event at each of the cottages or at the general pavilion then. They'll have grills at the,
Calvin, feel free to, if you would like to explain further.
Yeah, the discussion is, we could have, if you sold it for a group of 12 guys or something like that, where they wanted to do a barbecue out there, we could have our staff attend it and do that, so.
Requested event would be held in-house of Pinehurst Resorts. They would not be able to throw any sort of outside events that would call for more people, that type of thing.
That's typical, yeah, that we would not allow outside events like that. We would cater it on our property.
Well, I mean, the reason these questions are relevant is because the zoning classification talks to, the last sentence says, the district is intended to provide lodging facilities for visitors while minimizing any adverse impact on neighboring residential areas. So it's sort of our responsibility to kind of drill through that, if you don't mind. That's
Yeah,
why
we
we ask the
understand.
questions.
Well, I think that was one of my concerns when I viewed it first before seeing where they were going to be located. I was a little more concerned about that buffer requirement. And even, considering, I don't know how feasible it would be to add as a condition, but if the property to the south were developed, then maybe require a class 3 buffer or just extend it around the residential portion, around that boundary, just to further, minimize whatever impact there would be, or go ahead and say, you can utilize the current vegetation in place, but, in the event that this is developed in the future, I don't know if you can tie that condition to another parcel or not, but just to ensure that those residences aren't harmed.
We're given the topography of the, of the plot that we're speaking about being so much higher than the residences.
Yeah.
Calvin, just while I've got you, so we're talking about a 52-bed development here. Would there be opportunity for adding cots? Are there pull-out couches for beds? Would there be
Occupancy limits.
would there be occupancy limits? That's a good question. Can you speak to that a little bit? How many people you would allow to rent this thing and then provide beds for them?
So the intent is really just to have 2 double beds per unit. I'm not going to say that there's never a situation where a family may be there and they need a cot or a pull-out, because that's possible. But the intent is just for, 2 beds in each room.
If it becomes, your demand is great, and this is probably well-received by the community, or the golfing community, and it becomes a pretty consistent, now we've got 52 beds that are consistently turned into 65, 70 beds, it kind of starts to drive through into our parking consideration, as well as some of the other considerations that we've got, for the development, so.
So you're thinking of the short-term rentals that advertise 3 bedrooms, sleeps 20?
I mean, that's a good example for sure, sleeps 20. I didn't know if you were going to be piling people up on the counter or not in this place. Yeah, but it's something for us to consider, because I know you in the hospitality world, you want to make sure that the experience of your customer is, great.
That's correct.
But that's a concern of ours, I think, from something that we're thinking about.
Can you speak to whether or not the applicant or the resort would be interested in doing the stormwater to a 25-year plan versus a 10-year plan as a condition?
Let Tim speak to that? Or did Tim go?
I know in other site plans, in other site plans from the resort that we've seen, you voluntarily have said, we are going to do this to the 25-year plan, which was
Yeah,
well received.
I'm gonna let Tim answer that, but I'll just say off the bat, we are really, really low on impervious surface here. So it's very low. We're below the 24%.
Oh, it is true. However, we are dealing with topography that's got some slope to it, 2 residential areas.
Well, it actually goes back up. So the residential area
Well,
goes
there's a
back
dip
up.
in the bottom, yep.
Yeah, because of the wetland down in the
Right.
bottom. And all the flow from this site, none of the flow goes toward any residential development. All of the flow for this development would go down into the wetland, and then the wetland carries out the other direction. So it won't go toward the residential development at all. So if we back up here, yeah, actually,
So I hear you saying you can't commit to that.
I don't think so, not right now.
Netting it out.
If you look at this, plan, if you look at where we are, the water flows this way toward the wetland area, and the water from the residential neighborhood here also flows toward that wetland area. So, and then it all goes out into the pond that's located to the northeast.
Well, there's some dips. For example, I think the lot next to the lift station was probably sold as a membership lot. And if you see the lot, you'll probably understand why.
It's wet. I'm pretty sure that one's wet. Yeah, right. That one right there that doesn't have a house on it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that wetland finger goes right up to that edge. It's got to be pretty wet lot. So.
Okay, well, I'd ask you to consider it. I mean, I don't think we could necessarily put it as a condition, but it's up to council if they want to add that, obviously.
And the only thing I would add to that is the pretty good sized pond just downstream of that. Will sort of serve as a BMP, relative to the pre-post. So if we're holding the required 10-year pre-post and we're doing, as Bob mentioned earlier, I think we would do probably some type of treatment, i.e. bioswales and devices. They all go to that pond, which should mitigate anything downstream of that.
You can actually get a
The
good
upper
sense
pond
of
you're talking about.
Yeah, you can actually get a good sense of the scale of that pond here. That large blue area is the pond on the northeast.
Yeah, our site's plus or minus 14 acres, and if you
Okay.
look at that pond in comparison to that, it's a pretty large device at the end of the day. Look at Matt, because I know Matt's background. But
My only last question has to do with, are these going to be ever sold as a timeshare?
That's not the plan.
Well, you know where I'm going next.
Where you going? Travis is
here. The plat indicates a vehicle distribution, which is based upon a timeshare and not a hotel. In other words, the ICE specification that was used as a timeshare, which comes out to like 5, for example, in the peak PM, it comes out to 5 vehicles in that peak period, versus a hotel specification, which has a different multiplier. In other words, it uses the number of rooms, which is 32 rooms, which comes up to more like anywhere from 18 to 30, who knows, trips. And so I'm curious why the specification was used from timeshares and not hotel out of the trip generation table.
Good afternoon, Travis Flewitt with Kimley Horn and Associates, transportation engineer. Glad to be here. We used timeshare. We looked at several different land use options. The ITE trip generation manual does not have rental golf cottages as a land use, so we just looked at a range of different options, and timeshare was the one that made the most sense, at least in my opinion, because they rent as a unit rather than individual rooms like a hotel room. Another category they had is resort hotel, which If anything, this is more like a resort hotel because you have the golf course right there. It is on the golf course property. But the timeshare made the most sense, and it's
It
still.
also comes out with the lowest number.
Well, it's comparable to if these were single-family homes. We projected about 100 daily trips. 9 single-family homes is about 114 daily trips, 11 AM peak hour trips, and 10 PM peak hour trips versus we projected about 95 daily, 15 AM and 8 PM. And, these are going to be people on vacation. They're here to play golf. They're probably playing golf at number 8. They're probably not making normal peak hour trips like a typical commuter. They may be making trips throughout the day, going to lunch, going to dinner, but probably not so much in the 7 to 9 AM and maybe not 4 to 6 PM. So, but still, we're in the order of magnitude. That's really what we were aiming for. So, if it's 20 trips instead of 10, it's still not a lot of traffic. We were trying to get the right order of magnitude. It's 10 to 20 trips, not 100 trips. It's still not in the range where you would need to do a traffic study. So if I'm off by half, it's still not a significant.
No,
impact.
I understand that. And I don't think traffic is a deal breaker in any way, a major consideration in this site issue. It just that stands out when I see it's not a timeshare. It's more like a hotel. It's being advertised as kind of a resort hotel or whatever, or something else. And there's other categories that yield different volumes of trips. And I was just curious why we use the lowest possible category.
It wasn't to show a low number of trips. It was just that was the most characteristic, most similar to this that I thought it fit the description the best, since these don't rent by the room. But, if we
I would
want to
just-
call it hotel and quote the numbers for hotel, I have no issue with that.
In fact, if you have 12 people in a building, they don't have 12 cars because they flew in together. They may be using some of the resort shuttles. So vice a hotel where usually don't come as a group in hotel, it's individual rooms and individual
then
rental cars.
The multiplier for timeshare is the number of units. So they're using 9 as the multiplier versus the hotels and all the other categories of lodging related to hotels. And there's different types of hotels in the manual. They all use the number of rooms. So I just, it sort of stood out. It was like a red flag that it was so different. Anyway, it just, like I said, I don't think it's a deal breaker, but it's just something that, to ask about. Because we ask things.
Do we have any timeline between phase 1, phase 2, and do we know what buildings would be included in phase 1 and phase 2?
Yeah, we do. Let's see. Yeah, the plan is to start up from this side, start from the number 8 side. So the 5 cottages from number 8 going down to number 7 would be the first 5. And then working, because you've got to put in all the infrastructure, you've got to put in the roadways and things, so go ahead and start in the back. That way, you're not, as you go, people can have a good experience. They may have to drive through a little bit, but the other cottages can be under construction. So that will be the phasing. I think from a phasing perspective, Calvin, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that phase 1 would get started pretty quickly. And then I think phase 2 will be dependent upon the success of phase 1. If it becomes something that is really, very well accepted and they're having good success, I think they would move right into those and may not even stop depending on how things are going, so.
No timeline at all for phase 2, which would be the final 4 cottages, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Or
The
well,
cottages
in
on,
this case, the initial 4 cottages, I guess, depending on which way.
right. The cottages on the 10th hole would be the last cottages.
Thought or inkling of changing those 4 cottages up if the numbers came back different and maybe it would make more sense to change to 3 or 4 or 1 building, anything?
I'm not sure, I understand, so combining units or?
Is there a possibility of changing the number or changing the number of buildings in phase two? Any change?
I don't think so. I think we're locked into the 9 units as of right now, and I think that's where we've gone at this point with the design. I don't think there's any intention. I think this is really what the resort wants to build. You know, I think they're going to see if the 8-bedroom is successful, they will continue to build the other 2, but if it's not successful, they could become 4-unit buildings or something along that line. So
That's sort of a question to staff. If phase 2, they decide to build all 8-bedroom units rather than anticipated and as approved X number of, a smaller number, is that a significant deviation on a site plan?
If the total number of rooms isn't increasing, I mean,
So you
I don't think, if you go from, if they do less 8-bedroom and more 4-bedroom in the first phase.
Okay.
But then they do all the 8 in the second phase, I mean,
So
I
you
don't wanna
think
be put on
total,
the spot
total
to
number
answer.
of rooms is going to be that's a criteria that you
Yeah,
probably wouldn't be exceeded?
What I would like to look at is, if you look at the total number of 8-bedroom, right, that's, because that's the highest use, total number of 8-bedroom. If that were to increase at all, or the floor area would increase at all over the allowances of, what, 10%, I believe is what the criteria is, then it's got to go back through.
Okay.
That's already within the thought process of what staff does daily. We would not need to make that any sort of condition. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it depends on how ideal the Village of Pinehurst and the applicants want the outcome to be. If you wanted to make sure that there's this specific mix in phase 1 and this specific mix in phase 2, but I can't answer.
I don't think we're that good forecasters, but
Exactly.
Not only that,
the only
it
thing,
doesn't
the total number of rooms is a max that once exceeded, then you got to go back through some type of analysis and approval. Is that correct?
That's right.
That would be a significant change in the site plan.
It sure would not pass the smell test, it seems.
Okay.
rooms and structures, so
Satisfied, yeah.
I think rooms and structures, Alex.
Correct, yeah.
So if it became 11 buildings, but more 4-bedroom buildings, I think that would probably have to come
But
back
if it
as well.
became 8 buildings, less than 52, it would not have to go back through the approval process. Okay.
Is there going to be a sign out on Murdochsville Road indicating where that, these cottages, or is that, there's no signage
Just the existing
specified with
signage.
this? I didn't
is
see
there.
anything about signs in here.
No, I think it's just going to be the number 8 signage that's there
Okay,
today.
nothing
Yeah.
will change there.
Nothing
Okay,
changing.
thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing no more questions, Bob. Thank you, and thank you to your team for presenting today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
That'll move us into the public input portion. We do have 5 people signed up, and number 1 is Bob Kuntz. Did you mean to sign as a citizen? Okay, all right.
Just in case.
And then, not to jump number 2, but we also have Tim Carpenter signed up as a public comment. Okay, for the record as well. Thank you both. So we'll move forward. Is Guy Thompson here with us? Okay, so we had Guy Thompson signed up. If he shows back up, we'll allow him to speak. But next is Lynn Goldhammer. Lynn, welcome.
Bad. We got through it quickly. Did a great job.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is working?
Ma'am.
Okay. I just signed up mainly because if I didn't and I had a thought, I couldn't speak it. So I thought we were going to be discussing also Pinehurst South on here, and we
Yeah, we
didn't,
won't- not
we
in the
didn't really
public hearing.
discuss that, did we?
So we won't move into any sort of public comment phase for Pinehurst South, as we're not going to take action on it. It's just a feedback session.
Okay.
Working session for us and staff tonight.
For you folks, so enough for us to discuss
Yes,
out here.
We hope to one day have that as a
Okay.
opportunity. But if you have anything to say on this?
Okay.
public
You know,
hearing-
not really, but I think it makes sense that you're building 3 4-bedroom places and 1 8-bedroom first, so that if the 4 bedrooms are staying filled and the 8-bedroom isn't, you can rethink building any more 8-bedroom ones. So that sounds like a good idea. But will they be able to make that change then? If they go with this proposal, will they be able to say, oh, you know, the 8 bedrooms really aren't
Fewer rooms,
producing as much as we
less
thought?
intensity, so, yep.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
There would be fewer rooms, so less intensity overall. So, yeah, they'd be able to go through.
So instead of building 3 more 8-bedroom places, they could just change it into just 3 more 4-bedroom places, and would they have to go back through this whole process to get approval on that?
As long as it was not increased, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Or if there were not a specific condition related to that. If there were a specific condition related to anything, that would have to go back through.
I guess that's it, except one thing I was thinking, like, you know, when they're all going to be 2 beds in there, I thought, is this expected for 2 couples to split that? Or would they be better off having a 1 bed and a pull-out couch that if it's kids or something, they can use that, but otherwise they have a more usable sitting area than 2 big beds in a room? But that's up to them.
Yeah, I think the hotel experts will
Um,
get those figured out better than we can.
All right, I guess that's it. I thought there'd be more on this other topic, so I was waiting on that.
Hope to. We'll get you with staff maybe after this. Thank you, Lynn. So I'd like to welcome up Travis Fluitt. Same as well. Okay. Well, I guess, you know, honestly, you guys had us all scared for a little bit, hearing 5 from 5 people. So as we have completed the public input portion, can I get a motion to exit the public hearing and enter back into our regular meeting?
Make a
See if I can
motion.
get it right this time. I move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Bruce and a second by David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we have exited the public hearing and we are back into our regular meeting. So let's go ahead and begin comments amongst ourselves, deliberations, in hopes that we move toward a motion and a recommendation.
I don't really have any comments. I think they, you know, it was pretty detailed. I feel like the impact on the residential neighbors is as minimal as possible, considering where they're going to put everything. And I do feel like, you know, seeing the timeshare figures thrown out there could have been alarming, but I kind of like that a little bit more, because if they're held to a standard where there's less capacity available, I think that will allow less of the general public to kind of go out there and treat it as another watering hole. They can still do that at the clubhouse, but, you know, I think these being specifically limited to the guests, you know, staying in each lodge, I think helps prevent a lot of the issues that we'd have otherwise. And, you know, the pavilion, I think the noise ordinance, all that's already in control to, you know, remedy any issues that we'd have there, so.
Staff is recommending the conditions which the applicants has agreed to a maximum of 35-foot height and a Class 2 buffer requirement. You had mentioned possibly Class 3. As a board, are we fine with the Class 2?
That's what it is for every other hotel at this point. So, you know, these, if anything, seem to be a little less invasive than what you might see if that were the case behind there. So I think it's already more, there's already enough in place so they don't have to plant a buffer, so to speak. So yeah, I think that's fine.
I'd agree with David on that. I think it's a fantastic idea. I love them. I wish they were around when I was traveling in golf groups, to tell you the truth. I think it looked great, rather than scattered among a whole bunch of different condos or something like that, larger groups. So I think it has tremendous potential. I think I may have said it a couple times. My biggest concern is the impact on the nearby neighborhood. And I'm sure that the resort will do its best to minimize any impact. So I have a lot of faith that they will actually try to do that. So I think it's a great idea.
I just have one quick question, because I don't understand, I guess, why the parking standards are tied to a timeshare, which is a type of ownership, not a type of occupancy.
Because of the use is similar to a timeshare than a
Well,
hotel.
No, it's similar to a hotel.
I'd argue that timeshares are similar to a hotel.
But I just don't see how it can be tied to ownership. That's like saying a condo has this many and a cooperative has something else. It seems to me that it shouldn't even be a consideration. It should be the type of use and the occupancy of the building or the room. If it's occupancy is 4 per room, which I assume it is, if you put in 2 double beds, that's the capacity of it, then it would be 4 times the number of uses for the number of people.
I agree with
Just,
Louise.
I-
I think that the trip generation was flawed in the sense that I still believe it used the wrong parameter, but I don't think that the number of trips and the traffic volume is a deal
No,
breaker
I
in
don't
this
either.
particular circumstance.
It's just the use of timeshare, which is not a type of use.
Right.
It's a type of ownership.
Well, and
Have anything to do with anything else.
the parking is not tied to trip generation. We're talking about two different categories, right?
Parking is based on the number of rooms, and yet the trip generation was based upon the number of units. So it's like, wait a minute. But again, I don't think it's a deal breaker.
I think it's a great project. I just am baffled by that.
Well, I think that that's an important question that you have, because I think a lot of our conversation tonight really dealt with logic of the scenario. And I think a lot of even our questions as a board to the applicant were checkmark questions based upon the logic of what they were thinking overall. We think that's important to consider, because if this development was not situated where it is, then it could be something that would be more important to consider. But I think considering where it's at, a lot of those concerns, kind of to Jack's point, is not as of a magnitude of a concern. Let's see, Matt's brain working here, so.
I'm thinking, but it may not be relevant, so don't let me interrupt you. I'll just comment to that point, the staff's recommendation for a condition on a reduced building height, I feel like addresses that somewhat. I mean, lighting is the other thing I thought about, and the lighting requirement is different for non-residential. But we're restricting building height to 35 feet, which is 15 feet lower, so that gives me peace of mind about the impact of, light in residential areas, plus we're 600 feet from the closest residence, which is pretty far. So that gives me peace of mind. On the traffic, I just think about intensity, and I do feel like the intensity is going to be different. The redistricting name kind of betrays that intention, and that it's called hotel, but obviously the function use is slightly different than if they were doing that. Without the first condition, would that mean that they would have to clear trees to meet your buffer? I'm not sure why we have to have that condition.
Potentially, and that's more of a safeguard to prevent the felling of trees in order to plant a mix of longleaf pines, understory.
Gotcha.
And on that topic, I would like to offer a little friendly wordsmithing to that condition in case this were to be considered as part of a motion. Maybe in lieu of providing a Class 2 planted buffer along the adjacent residential properties, the applicant to retain the existing vegetation, something similar to that.
I guess the way Gun Club ends right there, what does the future of the street network look like in that area? Will that ever be extended? Is that up to the property owner, or?
It would be, because the extent of Gun Club there is the public right-of-way, so.
That's
after
where the
that's
public right-of-way
private.
ends.
And, I know Paul had a bit of a question about access and 2 forms of egress or not. If a new vehicular access point were added to this development, then that would be a major modification as defined.
That
in
would
the
come
PDO.
back before?
Exactly.
Okay. Because we would need to consider that as a condition then, like if perfect.
I'll also point out that 35-foot condition would go through the full parcel and any sort of future development on the south end that you were concerned about as well. So,
Do we need to, it just says along the residential properties, does it need to specify a width?
I think that the, in lieu of the Class 2, I think that would cover it. And that's how I would administer that, is that the 20-foot dimension, I mean, if you.
Yeah, that's fine. It's more referring to the plantings than it's not changing the dimensional requirement for the buffer.
Correct.
Okay.
Of us working on the possibility of a recommendation. I'd also point out that we do have to adopt a consistency statement.
One of the things that I thought was important to come out of this hearing for me is I've heard it murmured in the community that this is essentially a short-term rental development after Pinehurst has said that short-term rentals are not allowable in residential areas. And I think it was very useful to have clarification from the applicant to specify the differences between this, which is clearly a hotel use, and what is a short-term rental. So I hope that the community will be able to understand that, and it's communicated in a way that it alleviates the any soreness around a perceived double standard, because I think the two uses are clearly differentiated when you understand exactly what the resort is contemplating here.
I mean, the closest single-family resident, I think, is either 520 or 600 feet, so it's not like you're going to disturb your neighbor right next door.
I think that's part of the difference, Paul, but I think another difference is the way that they're contemplating managing the rentals and having on-site supervision of the property, and the way that they're limiting the use of the
no
common
kitchen, for
areas.
instance.
No kitchen. I mean, it really changes the use. And I think the way that people would use the property. So, anyway.
The only thing I will say, Paul, is that if you've ever heard them really turn up the volume at the cradle music, I mean, you can hear it all the way down St. Andrews for quite a ways into the residential area. So it's, now that's a daytime thing, but I'm just saying that it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Just hope they don't do any fireworks there.
I'll accept or ask for a consistency statement.
I'll go ahead. I move the Planning and Zoning Board adopt the statement of consistency and authorize its chair to execute the document as the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the Village of Pinehurst 2019 Comprehensive Long-Range Plan as described in the staff report prepared by Alfred Cassidy dated January 25th, 2023. Achieving goals in accordance with the comprehensive plan is considered reasonable and is in the best interest of the public.
Motion by David,
Second?
second by Jack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we do have a consistency statement for the application. So now let's continue to discuss and move forward towards a recommendation if we feel we should.
I move the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval with conditions to the Pinehurst Village Council of the conditional rezoning of approximately 14.56 acres of parcel ID 200000655 from R30 Residential District to Hotel Conditional District, with conditions being, number one, in lieu of providing Class 2 vegetative buffer, the applicant shall retain existing vegetation along residential properties. And number two, the building height of the proposed cottages shall not exceed 35 feet in height.
We have a motion on the floor by Matt and a second by Sonia.
Can I suggest one slight tweak to the first condition? In lieu of the Class 2 buffer, just also reference the 20 feet. I think it's implied with the Class 2, but just also including that is what it's going to remain, I think would be helpful.
If we say in lieu of, we say a width, then does that mean?
Well, the Class 2 is 20 feet, so it's in lieu of the Class 2, but still maintaining that 20-foot buffer. So you're not requiring the replanting, but you're still requiring that 20-foot zone.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable in lieu of providing the 20-foot Class 2 vegetative buffer.
In lieu of providing the Class 2 buffer, everything else, but just ensuring that that vegetative zone is also to remain 20 feet.
Matt, if you're going to amend your motion, do you mind rereading it for me?
Sure. The whole thing.
Well,
I move that, okay, as I said, motion with condition number 1 being in lieu of providing a Class 2 vegetative buffer, the applicant shall retain existing vegetation along residential properties at a
Width of,
width of 20 feet. Minimum, at a minimum width of 20 feet.
Matt? Still some discussion for Bruce?
Excuse me, the existing vegetation there is substantially greater than 20 feet. And I think what the original intent was to have them maintain that existing vegetation. You would now be permitting them to reduce it to 20 feet if they so chose to.
I guess I didn't see it as reducing that because I didn't see them creating a 600-foot buffer, in other words, which is where I guess, one of the closest points is. But if they didn't maintain, there's no set edge. It just says they're going to maintain the natural buffer in that 20 feet is what I was hearing. Because otherwise, if they were taking and replacing whatever it is, they could be removing vegetation within that 20 feet to satisfy that requirement. So essentially, to me, it was still 20 feet regardless. It's just what they are responsible for within that 20 feet by calling it either a Class 2 buffer or just allowing that natural vegetation in there.
I understand what your intent is, but I think you would be creating the opportunity for them to reduce it 20 feet if it currently exists at 50 or 100 or 2.
I think it's already there without with it as stated.
You
They
could
can
say,
reduce it to 20
retain
feet already.
existing vegetation no less than 20 feet.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
That's your concern, if that's the concern.
Matt has a motion on the floor. Unless he agrees to amend, we'll move the motion forward to a,
Well, I guess my question is to Alex, how, in terms of interpretation and what would be meeting or not meeting the condition is, I hear what Bruce is saying. Is there something we should be concerned about with regards to clearing up to the 20 foot of existing trees?
But you also have the safeguard of the wetland area there. It's a large portion of that plus a 30-foot buffer off of that. So that's going to be protected no matter what. So what is that? At worst case, what does that create? A cleared path of 80 feet? I understand the concern, but I don't think it's a reality. Or a high probability, I should say. Let me correct.
so there'll be 30 foot coming off of the wetland area,
If,
wherever that boundary is. Is that boundary set?
we're going to put the diagram up there if that helps.
Okay.
All right. So if Darren could with the cursor kind of show you, see that hatched area, that's the wetland area. So it'd be 30 foot around that entire wetland area would have to remain undisturbed. That means that, other than maybe some light utility work, and you got to consider there is a utility easement or there will be a new utility easement that will need to be granted based on the relocation of those, which Moore County would have full authority within that. The only area you have that might be of concern then would be kind of where Darren just has his cursor there, and then to the south and west. So outside of that easement area up there and anything beyond 20 foot up to that sort of peak, knowing that there's going to be hardly any likelihood of a road or an access that would be constructed across either portions of that wetland, not to mention it would have to come back through the approval process where you'd have another crack at it.
Well, and you can disturb wetlands, you just have to pay for it and get approved. It's not, just to clarify, they could do something there, and that's not outside of what's allowed. It's just really complicated.
And Matt's referring to the process of where you have to get the approval through other state and federal agencies. On top of that, we do have our own requirement where we have that undisturbed
Okay.
buffer. So that
Right.
Discussion? It's a valid point. Do we want to Matt, unless you want to rescind your motion. and
I'll
then
leave it as
continue
is.
Discussion as a board, or would you like to continue the motion at 20 feet?
I'll continue it with as modified by, sorry, I didn't sleep much last night. David, yep.
Yeah, but we do have a motion on the floor by Matt and seconded by Sonia. Given the discussion, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on that motion, beginning with Matt on my left.
Aye.
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 So it's unanimous, 8-0, for the recommendation to council to approve with the 2 conditions as agreed upon by the applicant. Thank you all.
Sorry, Jeremy, I messed up your roll call vote.
No, it's okay. I was going to just
I
go
just
ahead and
like
move it
saying aye.
forward. but- Topic we have tonight in the general business is for us to discuss the Village Place in Pinehurst South form-based code. This is just going to be a work session format. We're going to take no action on this. Who from the village is going to?
Can we get a break, please?
Yes.
That's just going to give us an opportunity to maybe resituate the room a little bit and stand up, stretch our legs.
Well, I'm moving us forward quick tonight, so forgive me. But yes, 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 5:41. Everyone. That was a well-needed break.
So should I, Alex?
Welcome, Darren, as we all kind of find our seats here. I'll take this time, however, to go ahead and make sure that we acknowledge that, I'll go ahead and take this time, please, everyone, to acknowledge that this is Darren's very last meeting with us as a planning and zoning board. And so I don't know if we should throw things at him during this last presentation, if we all want to say our goodbyes in a hug, high five,
Just turn their chairs around.
turn the chairs around on him, put our backs on him a little bit. But no,
This is enough.
but no, all seriously, I think that certainly for me, and I think for many of us on the board, that we find your professionalism very enlightening. You're certainly, your fingerprints and thumbprints are all over the work that we're doing tonight. And you have been a great benefit to not only our village, but certainly as a leadership to us as a board. So thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm sad to be leaving, but there's another journey ahead of me. So, but you're in good hands. Pardon me? I keep a lot of my emotions inside. So, but we're still in good hands, and I've told Alex and the administration that I'm going to continue to advise on this until these things are done and through, because these are also my babies as well. So, but tonight, we've started the journey on Pinehurst South, but even before we started to get moving, we did give you some handouts tonight. So we gave you copies of the Village Place Small Area Plan, right? Right? We handed those out, correct? Shannon? We gave you the Pinehurst South Small Area Plan. We gave you the Village Place Small Area Plan. So those should be the final versions. We have those up online right now. But those should be those should be the kind of the guiding documents as we start, moving forward with zone changes, with conditional zoning, with things like that in these particular areas. We're not done with Pinehurst South yet, but you have the plans that's going to help guide the form-based code. Did we give you we gave you the form-based code document too, didn't we? Okay, so there's 4 documents? What's the 4?
Documents and.
Yeah, but we shouldn't have given them a full form-based code for.
You've got 3.
Okay, you got 3. Sorry. So the form-based code for Village Place, that is, I wanted to go over this last time, but that is kind of the final document that at some point here in the near future, we're going to ask blessing from the Planning and Zoning Board and from the council to approve that as a document. That document then sets forth some of the work that we're doing with we're currently writing the special district, the Village Place Special District. That's in development right now. And there might be other things that, if somebody's has to come through with a conditional rezoning of some sort, those will be 2 guiding documents that the idea is that, so if they're coming through with a conditional rezoning, that there'd be some type of consistency statement with those plans. So that's the overarching deal that we want with those 2 plans. Now for tonight, because A, time is burning, B, I really don't think with Pinehurst South we need to micromanage the uses as detailed as we did in Village Place. Because this is a larger area, there's more vacant space, and I think when you look at the comp plan and some of the mixed use ideas that they wanted in the comp plan, I think I'm going to just start out with, say, Block A. So, and write this. Well, first of all, take Pinehurst South plan and go to page. I want you to take Pinehurst South plan and go to page. Go to page 54. So if you go to page 54, if you go to page 54 and 55, that kind of shows what the, kind of the bird's eye view of what the area is kind of intended to look like. On page 55, the right, that's a detail of this core area that's right up here around the Boys and Girls Club. So as we move forward with the table of uses, we're kind of looking at, what was the bird's eye view? What was kind of our idea of what those areas should look like? And when we set up when we set up all the building types for Pinehurst South, it kind of generally matches what council ended up approving as the preferred development plan in this area. So what I'm just recommending that we do, just to go over like Block A. I'm seeing Block A as more of a village mixed-use district type of block, because that's an area where you want more retail. That's an area where we're talking about having, a separate restaurant. If you look on page 55, 55 is actually showing a restaurant, a retail coffee shop. So I think that's more in line with a mixed use area. You go down to Block B, I think that could be mixed use and neighborhood commercial or potentially OP. So I think we're looking at combining that block and having those types of uses in that block. You go over here to Block C, I think that's can be a good village mixed use area. So village mixed use and OP. So this is the area where the comp plan talks about having this innovation district. The market analysis and the small area plan talked about this area could be a good area for a golf cluster. So what we'll do is put together a table that kind of matches the building types here. Building types that we're recommending is mixed use, office. I think retail is something we might want to circle back to in that district, and potentially and maybe live work. I think the primary idea in this Block C is going to be mixed use and office. I think that's the primary idea of what we want in there, or what the Village Place plan, or Village Place, what the Pinehurst South plan calls for. If you go over here to the east a little bit on Block D, this one I've got a question mark on. This could easily be village mixed use, or it could be OP. So we have to be careful, because that's going to be that won't be adjacent. That will be adjacent to a portion of residential that's along here. So I think when we come back with you with the table of uses, we might narrow it up on this side just because of the adjacency of the residential uses. If you go down to this block, which is Block E, this is the area where we did make some changes based on the last council approval. Block E is going to be single-family detached development in this area. So that will all come back as single-family detached. Trends going across to the west, this block, which is Block G, I'd see this probably as potentially a mixed use and potentially NC. So you're along a highway, so you could have things like restaurant, retail, you could have a mixed use, you could have banks, things like that. So I think that's an appropriate uses along there. And then if you go to the west, this is the area that's currently zoned RMF. So this entire area is zoned RMF. On the regulating plan, we're showing several types of residential development pattern or types in that area that start out with 5 as townhouses, cottages, the single-family villas, single-family manor. We don't have a hotel in there, and multiple family. So I think what we'll do next time is we'll actually, instead of going over this, you'll end up going over block by block, but we'll make a recommendation. Right now, the table that you have is what the permitted uses are within those districts. What we're going to do is come back with a recommendation based on kind of the broad overview, broad brush that I did today. Oh, I forgot one block, Block I. So Block I is right here. So Block I is along Monticello. And I would see that, I potentially see that as more of an OP, so office professional. Potential, we are showing that as just office in that particular area. So we'll come back, we'll make the adjustments, and we can go over that at some point in the future. So that's just a basic, quick overview. I know, is there any general questions? Do you have any concerns with how I kind of laid things out in there as described?
This use table is a starting point.
Mm-hmm, correct.
Okay, and we should go block by block to see whether it fits what we think is the.
Correct. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back, Jack, with a recommendation based on kind of that overview that I did with it should be looking like a VMU, whatever. We're going to come back and give you a recommendation. I think you all need to look at that, but we're going to come back with a recommended table.
So the use table approved, or actually, allowed by right or so forth, comes from the use types, whether it's NC, OP, NC, and so forth?
Correct.
Okay.
What's currently permitted.
So in other words, you're just taking what's permitted out of our current planning, PDO, and applying that here, and we have to do the fine tuning.
And then what we'll do is we'll fine tune like we did with Village Place and start eliminating uses. But I think in Pinehurst South, I don't think we're going to have to take as many uses off the table. I just don't.
I think
Probably
this
not.
was that was one of the more interesting exercises, and Village Place was.
You like that?
I thought it was good discussion.
Good, so do I.
It's a good way to get familiar with the
It
use
does make
table
you
and
very
allowed
familiar with the
uses.
table.
It's a great exercise.
Well, I was going to go over, we're going to do that tonight, but the time. And we should, and we'll come back, and what I see us doing next time is we'll come back with this table. Right now, it's got all the X's on here that are black that show that these are permitted. What we'll do is we'll come back with red X's or red X's with the strike through and say, these are uses that we were recommending to take off the table, and we'll put a red X on it, just a red X on it. These are uses that we'll add to the table.
Yeah, because for instance, none of them have hotel marked on here, but obviously we did designate hotel based on building type, so that would be something that would be updated and what would be proposed.
Correct, because currently there's no hotels that are
In B.
allowed in any of these districts down
Right.
there.
Oh, no, okay.
Correct. I think there's an error too. What isn't block B and F? Didn't we combine this?
B has,
Didn't we combine this into one block, Alex? Do you remember that?
I thought we did.
There was a sliver of open space there that we kind of
right.
terminated. That's what it was.
But I thought didn't we combine that into one big block? So we'd
I
have,
thought the argument was that why not put them together? I mean,
We
they're really
can. That's a
contiguous.
simple fix.
They have the same frontage on both sides and border the same type of uses.
okay, well, Alex and the team will come back in a couple weeks.
You like saying that, don't you?
No, Alex hates that.
But as a board, is our overall
He's mad at me right
feeling
now.
that needs to be combined, right? I mean, there's nobody who feels different.
Yeah, I think so what's going to happen is we're going to have to potentially adjust the blocks then, because it's going to collapse everything.
Well, part of the reason we did end up leaving it separate, I think, was maybe from David's comment, because we wanted to keep a lower building height in F, and B has a higher building height, so we were trying
Because
to have
of
a
the
transition.
use in E.
As a single-family development,
Yeah.
that's to the east there? Okay, let's just, well,
That makes sense.
We did have that discussion, and
was
then we
rational.
went back and
Yeah.
forth on this. And I don't know if we have a strong feeling other than that point right there. I think that was,
that's a good point. It's really cognizant of the intended uses to the east and the height. So we were showing 1 to 3 to the north, and 1 to 3 might not be as appropriate down there where you have different uses to the west side of NC5, and certainly stuff to the east of that particular block. So it probably does make sense.
to your point, we did have that point, exactly. We all agreed, and then we stated, hey, the building heights coming along the line of Jackson Hamlet, wanted to make sure we were considerate, and then the other uses there, we backed away from.
Correct. Correct. And then, we'll come back with this, come back with the table of uses, then I guess the next part will be going over the lot standards. So the next step after this is going to be the table of dimensional requirements. Most of everything from the Village Place form-based code, it follows through to this, with the exception of the regulating plan and the lot standards. The lot standards down here, they're going to be a bit different than they are up in Village Place, because Village Place is a little bit more dense. So in Pinehurst South, the setbacks are going to be a little bit greater. There's going to be a little bit greater distance between the buildings than there is in Village Place. So that's going to be the main difference.
One of the next steps is you'll need this board to kind of go through a little bit more detail before you take it to council, or you'll take it and then we're going to come back?
No, we'll take it to council sometime down the road. Like I think I just handed out the table of dimensional standards, and I don't know, did we send over the proposed table of dimensional standards and the table of uses? Okay, so let's make a note. We can get a copy out to the planning and zoning board on that. We just did hand that over to, or I think we provided that over to the village council. And we're gonna have to have some of these same discussions with the village council on the regulating plan and the table of uses, because that's gonna get the most, attention, and the lot standards.
And that's for Village Place.
Correct. So, that's all I really got right now.
Feedback tonight, I'm hearing that if we so inclined on our own time to possibly dig into this a little.
Please do. Yes, please do. I think you should. Yeah, please do. Look at the Pinehurst South plan, look at kind of what the vision is scoped out in those various areas. Take a look at this table and have at it. And we can have that discussion in a couple weeks.
And should we be, I mean, you referenced it, but the form-based, wait, let me say the wrong thing. The small area plans, is that something we should also be just kind of putting an editor's eye through?
It's your guide, that's your guide.
But in terms of before it comes to us to officially accept?
No, we're done, we're
done with?
we're done with the small area plans.
Okay,
It's the
Form-based
form-based code. The
Form-based
form-based
code, that's
code's
the one we
going to
need
come
to-
back to you.
okay. So that we have for Village Place here is the one we need to.
Yep, correct. That we'll be asking for approval on at some point down the road.
So to give Ms. Goldhammer a little bit of, and as other citizens as well, some of the next steps in this process overall, if anybody who wants to give input, it's really kind of at the council level. From this point, I would probably say we're not going to have a public hearing on this, or
We're not going to have a public hearing on the form-based code, but I think the idea is we're going to bring it here for your blessing.
so
we
we
can
will
take
have
comment.
some action to take at some point.
Correct.
Okay, but it won't be necessarily in a public.
Correct. I think the cover page just says it has 2 TBDs on there on the Village Place form-based code.
Isn't this become part of the PDO?
It's difficult to adopt, it's almost, and we've, Alex and I and Kathy and staff have talked about that, and it's difficult to adopt a separate document as part of the PDO. It's easier to regulate often. We're actually creating a special district. So we're creating a special district utilizing the recommendations within this document. So the lot standards, the regulating plan, the table of uses is separate. So a lot of the standards, the architectural standards, we're looking at creating a special district for that, right? Alex, why don't you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so if you think about it, we went through and you guys got a recommendation, Village Council adopted small area plan. Now, from that, we start working on the form-based code. Once we get a blessing on the form-based code, then we have to implement that into the code. So eventually, yes, there will be some PDO and some zoning map updates, which will require a public hearing. But once we get the form-based code situated where, Planning and Zoning Board signed off approval or a blessing and Village Council has adopted it, then we know for sure, what the code requirements need to be. And then in the meantime, what we have to work out through staff is where and how to weave that into the existing PDO framework and the overall zoning itself.
Because it becomes difficult, Jack, if we adopt this code and all of a sudden we're trying to administer it and somebody's looking, it's kind of akin to the HPC guidelines. So it's like that separate document that's not within the PDO itself. So when somebody's trying to figure out what are my setbacks, what is lot size, what are the types of uses, it's hard to refer them back to this document from a regulatory standpoint. That's why we're going to take as much of the regulatory aspects of this document and create that code that we can fit that district into the PDO.
Yeah, I think the thought was it's just not as user friendly, especially not to, staff's going to be living in it. That's our jobs. But I got to go to this document over here. How did I know that I was supposed to go to this third secondary document and not what I thought was the main document?
Did I send you all the Hollandale?
Seems a little different than form-based codes within PDOs that I've seen from other municipalities, where they actually have it embedded in there, district by district.
It's going to be embedded in their district by district. I think, did I send you the Hallandale Beach Code?
Yeah.
It's going to be just like that. It's the same concept. We have to take what's in here and we have to put it in ordinance format, and that's what we're
So at
working
some
on.
point in time, there'll be a zoning map amendment.
Yes.
Which will designate Village Place as a special zoning district, I forget whatever the right terminology will be.
Yes.
And that's, the requirements of that special zoning district are reflected in the form-based
Correct.
codes,
Yes, yeah,
along with some other things in the PDF.
that's correct.
Is that a fair way
That
to
district
express
will reflect what's in the form-based code.
it? Okay.
There'll be a map and a text amendment that will be
Okay.
required.
Is there a, as we go through here and make recommendations or decisions, whatever they may be, I mean, is it possible to, whatever the remaining, I guess I'm looking at you, but really talking to Alex, but is there a remaining list of recommendations or decisions that you want from P and Z, and we can put it on the list, and we can say, okay, in March, we're going to accomplish this, in April, we're going to accomplish this. If we don't accomplish this, this is going to trigger a special meeting to get this done with, kind of lay out some milestones or POAM on how we want to get this, because I think we come back and we re-talk some of the same things over, and which is not bad, but I find myself with a different opinion the second time or third time I talk about it, because now I got Bruce influencing me. Before, it used to be Philip, and I was really hoping Matt would be over here. But, we can meander through this process for a very, very long time.
You're correct, and this is what we, and this is a good point, well, this, I had previously, when we embarked on the whole Village Place form-based code, I had set up a schedule of meetings, date by, or just a set of meetings. This is meeting one, this is we're accomplished meeting two, blah, blah, blah. We need to do the same thing for Pinehurst South. We just haven't done that.
And then the meeting happened.
Yeah. Well, but I think that's a good point.
You know what I mean? So just.
But no, you're right.
Just, it's basically for us to be self-disciplined.
No, you're correct. We need to set a future agenda of meetings of topics
And just,
that we're going to cover and
there's
stick
10
to it.
decisions, recommendations we need to make. If we're not, we'll stay here until midnight, or if we don't get done with those, we need to put a special meeting in so we can continue to move this along.
Yep.
I guess another question, may not have an answer for it. The renderings look great. I just think about driving down Highway 5, and I don't know how anyone could be so creative and make Highway 5 look good. But in this rendering, they did.
I had that thought too. I was like, this
I
is
was
Highway
like,
5.
This is really good. Where is that Highway 5? I'm like, no.
This is
But-
also aspirational, remember?
Yeah. It's like looking yourself in the mirror. I'm not that heavy, So once the moratorium is over, is there any anticipation on how quickly either one of the locations that there may be an interest to develop, or, you know what I mean? So, and this is kind of like a template or the doctrine, reality is not going to be the same. I like the idea. This would be great. As close as we can get to it would be fantastic, but we know we're not going to, this is panacea, but we're going to
Aspirational.
put the pieces in place to get as close to this as we desire. But, do we know, has anyone approached you and said, hey, I really like this, Alex, I'm looking at putting this building, or excuse me, Darren, as I said, I'm talking to you, or I'm looking at you, but talking to Alex. Do we know when that's going to occur? Is there any anticipation? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? Is it a decade?
I will tell you that we've had these, right here, these properties are in play right now,
Okay.
been acquired. So we've sat down and had some discussions on these particular.
They following this?
Yeah, they will
Okay,
fall in that,
okay.
yes, correct. So they will fall into that. The home builder site, that's got some, that's out, which is right about here, which is on that page. The home builder site is shown as the restaurant and the offices. So I sat, a real estate gentleman came in, agent came in, or broker came in the other day, and we talked a little bit about that vision for that, because it's in play right now. Everything below Blake Boulevard, the Mahaley tract, I forget there's two other properties down there. They're all in play. We're not getting a lot of, over the last, year or two, we've not gotten a lot. Prior to the moratorium and the small area plan, we're getting a little bit more tire kickers down here, but we haven't got a lot lately. I think Alex did get an inquiry about somebody wanting to take that 27 acres and turn it all into multiple family. And that wouldn't be allowed under the current plan or the current zoning. So that's the message that we do get back on it. But I think you're going to see something happen in here relatively quickly. And we'll see it on this site over here, but it's being actively marketed right now. So I think those within the next 1 year.
1 to 2, yeah.
I'm hearing a little more structure request, I guess, maybe a timeline that could help us move forward, because
Yep,
I think I
and-
agree with that, because I think as a board, we hear extra meetings and we hear time frame, and it would so help I think our mindset a little bit.
I mean, if you guys want to go down to weekly meetings, that's up to, no, I'm kidding.
You're fine with that?
I'm kidding.
Starting next week.
Okay.
Kidding.
What else do you need from us tonight?
Nothing, other than just thank you for the time. I'm glad I got to know you all, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll just be down the road, so, but I'm glad to have known you, and I think I appreciate all the time and effort that you all have put in. And this has always been, from my standpoint, it's always been a pleasurable experience for me most of the time.
Always most.
Always most. But no, it's great meeting you all, and I'll be around, and thank you for everything. So, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
you.
Appreciate it.
Darren.
Thank you.
Darren, I know as a citizen, I'm very appreciative of you. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, just this side.
So as we see Darren off, we'll point out that our next meeting date is 3/2/23. We'll please make sure Darren, would you please be in the audience with us that night?
Right.
I like to watch these on TV.
So we could ask you questions as you're sitting out there a little bit. But all right, so we'll make sure that's the next meeting date, and with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
One point, just before we get too far, Jeremy, if you know you won't be there for the March regular meeting, please let me know as soon as possible, because we were going to have likely to have a full agenda.
I will not be there.
So we do expect to have at least one, if not maybe two, potentially three text amendments to the PDO. Two initiated by village staff pertaining to retaining walls and potentially the allowance for recreational vehicles as it relates to, like, specifically the harness track property. And thirdly, the planned community neighborhood, which we had a work session with this group a couple of times previously.
And I don't, Jeremy, I don't know if you were able to send out a communication on that, but we did have a work session with council last time on both the Village Place form-based code, which is kind of an overview, and the planned community neighborhood. And there's discussion on that.
Yep, we mentioned that, and I think it would be very beneficial for all of our board members to review that section of the past council meeting, and I'll send out a link to it before this comes up. So, no, there was a work session with council, given the planned community ordinance that possibly will be coming before us in the March meeting. It's going to be beneficial for all of us to review it. I think it'll give us all a lot of context there of what's being asked. Anything else? With that, I will now take a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Louise.
Second.
Second
It was Sonia.
made by Sonia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 6:10. Thank you all very much.